In this video, I'll give you a quick look at a couple of the best ear training apps available and why they're worth using. I'll also share some tips on how to get started with ear training. While this video is meant for guitarists, any musician can follow the advice here to work on your ear training skills. The first app we'll look at is called Complete Ear Trainer and is available on Android and iOS devices. Complete Ear Trainer is possibly the most polished ear training app I've used. The interface is easy to use and looks great. It gives you a wide range of drills that progressively get harder in a way that feels challenging but not overwhelming. What I really like about this app is that you can go through the drills in different ways depending on how you want to practice. When you open the app, you can see that it gives you a choice between an easy mode and a classic mode. There are some other modes, as you can see, such as an arcade mode and custom training modes, but I recommend starting with the easy mode if you're new to ear training, as it gives you a quick and simple starting point. Then you can work your way to other modes as you get comfortable with ear training. The easy and classic modes are split into chapters that focus on different intervals, chords, or scales. When you start working on ear training, I recommend starting out with interval training drills, and I'll explain why later. Each chapter is split into different drills. Here you can see 3 drills that compare either minor or major third intervals to the octave. The goal with these drills is to try and identify the interval you hear. This app is different compared to other apps I've used in that it starts by asking you to compare an interval to the octave instead of comparing 2 similar intervals. This gives you a really easy starting point, as it's pretty easy to tell the difference between a third and an octave. So if you're a bit intimidated by ear training, this is a good starting point. So let's go into the first drill. This one asks you to identify whether the interval you hear is a minor third or an octave. What I like about this app is how easy the layout is to use drills. You swipe the screen to hear the example, then tap on the interval you think you heard. Tap the replay icon or swipe up and down to hear the drill again. Do this as many times as you need to get used to the sound of the interval and to try and identify it. If you get the answer right, it will show you in small text. Then you can listen to the intervals again or swipe to the next drill. Swipe the screen to go to the next drill. Here's what happens if you are wrong. It's only a small text that lets you know if you are wrong, so you need to pay attention and not just blindly swipe to the next drill. If you are wrong, you can tap the replay icon to listen to it again. I recommend listening to the interval again every time you get an answer wrong, as it's a good way to reinforce what the correct answer is. These types of drills are found in pretty much every ear training app, but the way this app moves through the drills and ramps up the difficulty is a step up from other apps. Okay, let's go out of the drill and tap the 3 dots to find the sound banks. By default, the app uses a piano for all examples. This is fine, but as a guitarist, you'll probably prefer to hear a guitar tone. You can download an electric guitar sound bank or any of the other instruments you can see here. A downside of this app is that the free drills are very limited. You can see in the easy mode that only the first chapter is free, which may not be enough to figure out if you want to stick with the app or not. There are more free drills in the classic mode, but you'll run into the limit pretty quickly. Overall, Complete Ear Trainer is a very well polished app. The drills use excellent audio quality and you can easily switch between instruments. There's a good progression of the drills and they quickly become challenging. The chapters are set up in a way that helps you learn faster. The app is available for Android and iOS, so it should suit most people. The downsides is that you need to pay for the full version to get the most out of it, as there aren't many free drills. The app also doesn't include any rhythm exercises, but there are plenty of other apps that cover rhythm skills. I recommend trying the app out, and by the time you get to the end of the free drills, you'll know whether it's worth paying for or not. The second app, which I highly recommend, is Perfect Ear Trainer. This is my go-to ear training app, and it's possibly the best I've ever used. Now, it's only available on Android, so if you use an iOS device, I recommend you keep watching to see what to look for in an alternative. Perfect Ear Trainer gives you the choice of what type of drills you want to work on. On the ear training section, there's exercises for training intervals, scales, and chords. If you tap on the metronome icon at the bottom, you can access the rhythm exercises. The stopwatch icon brings you to other training tools such as sight reading and fretboard memorization. It should already be obvious why I prefer this app over the other one, as it gives you a wider range of skills to work on and more choice on what to get started with. If we go back to the ear training section, you can see that you can choose from a number of different ways to work on intervals, chords, or scales. Working on a skill in a number of different ways is an important way to reinforce what you learn. So I highly recommend splitting your time between these different drills. Let's look at interval comparison to see how this app compares to Complete Ear Trainer. Unlike Complete Ear Trainer, which only gives you a very limited number of free drills, it quickly becomes obvious how much more you get with Perfect Ear Trainer. It should take months of daily practice before you reach the limit of free drills. With intervals, the free skills cover everything up to the perfect fifth. You can see this covers a lot of exercises. By the time you reach that limit, you should feel like an expert at identifying all of these intervals, and you'll know whether it's worth upgrading to work on higher intervals. If we go into the first exercise, which compares major and minor seconds, you can see that the layout is very different. Once you start, it will play 2 intervals. Tap what you think is the correct answer, and it will reveal what the intervals were. Unlike the other app, this time you can hear when you get an answer right. It might be a small difference, but it feels good to hear that little bling when you get the answers right. You can tap the buttons to listen to intervals again. I highly recommend doing this every time you get an answer wrong and really focus on the difference between the intervals. Make sure you understand why you were wrong before you continue. You can see that the app also shows you the notes on the fretboard and the staff. If you get an answer wrong, it might be a good idea to play those notes on your guitar so you can get used to how they sound. If we go back, you can see that each group of intervals is split between ascending, descending, and harmonic. It's really important to work on all 3 types of exercises to develop well-rounded ear skills. The exercises start out all using a common tone, which means they start from the same note. This makes it really easy to hear the differences between the intervals. So you may find that the exercises start out really easy. It starts to get really complicated when the app asks you to pick between 4 or 5 possible intervals. Later exercises use different starting notes, which makes them significantly harder but does wonders for your ear skills. Here's what it sounds like when no common tone is used. It's a lot harder, but all of this gradually becomes easy with practice. Once you can easily identify intervals without a common tone, you'll start to identify them in music you hear. That's when ear training really starts to pay off. There are a lot of other features in this app, but this should have given you a quick idea of what it's like to use. I highly recommend this app, so if you have an Android device, check it out. It has more than enough free exercises to work on ear training for months before you need to upgrade. There are other ear training apps I cover on my website, but let's go through some tips to help you get started with ear training. The first thing I recommend is to start with intervals. As explained in my video on intervals, intervals are the building blocks of music. Even if your goal is to be able to identify chords or scales by ear, you should start with intervals. Once you can accurately identify intervals by ear, scales and chords become a lot easier. For example, here's an exercise for comparing major and minor chords played as ascending arpeggios. If you spent time working on interval exercises, these drills will become a piece of cake because you'll be able to instantly hear the intervals that make up the chord. But if you start with chord drills, it's going to be an uphill battle. Here's the example again. I can hear that it uses a minor third interval from the root, which makes it a minor chord. Here's what the 2 chords sound like to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. It really does get easy once you've spent enough time working on interval exercises. This brings me to the second tip, which is to practice every day, even if it's only for 5 minutes. This should be obvious, but unless you're constantly pushing yourself forward, you won't be able to keep the momentum up to develop your ear skills. I talk about why this is so important in my guide on effective practice. The main reason daily practice is so important is because of something called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. This curve impacts how quickly you learn ear skills, as well as any guitar skills you're trying to work on. It's worth learning about, so check out the link in the description to learn what this curve is and how to deal with it. I recommend setting a daily reminder on your phone to help you build the habit of working on ear training every day. Also, try to work on a few ear training drills anytime you have a few spare minutes. The more practice you can get in, the faster you'll develop your ear skills. The last tip I'll cover is to commit to ear training for at least 2 months. Don't let yourself give up for the first 2 months. The reason this is important is because ear training can feel almost impossible in the beginning. You'll work on these drills over and over, but it may not feel like you're making any progress. This is when people start to doubt themselves and say things like, "I guess I don't have ears for this," or "I must be tone deaf." Don't give up and don't listen to these excuses. Ear training is hard at the start, but it's just like learning guitar is hard at the start. It's okay if you start off getting every drill wrong. If you stick with practicing daily, you'll eventually start noticing that you get more answers right. Then after a month or so, you'll start to find certain exercises feel easy. You'll wonder how you ever thought these exercises were hard at all. Some intervals may still trip you up, but eventually all of these exercises will feel easy. The key point is that ear training is hard at the start, which is why so many people give up and trick themselves into thinking that they're tone deaf. Don't fall for that trap and don't let yourself give up. Working on ear training is one of the best things you can do for your musical abilities, so stick with it and it will get easier. Thanks for watching, and find out more about ear training and best practices in my detailed guide in the description.